Well, it was obviously what we spoke yesterday was in relation to the, be able to say something, and whether it's the suttas, whether it's personal, impersonal, to convey to the others. But that was in the reference of, running the monastery and helping people and so on. But the same thing actually, it's even more useful for your own practice. So even if it's not being made for public, directed to a public, being able to convey, to write down, to explain, to describe what you think you understood will be the measure of your understanding. So that's when in the Veda meant, don't think you understood something unless you can write it down. And when somebody says, oh, such and such claims the final knowledge, they say, oh, let's go and question him. In other words, let's go and see what he has to say, because they themselves, being arahants with the final knowledge, can tell what he's describing, whether it's accurate, to what extent it's accurate, and so on. Adopting that as a principle, to be able to convey it, to write it down, to explain it to others, or something like that, it's actually good because if you don't, it's easy to slip into that kind of state of, oh well, I understood what I need to understand, or I am practicing towards understanding, I just can't put it in words. I often heard that from people, which kind of results in spending decades in robes and not being able to formulate an intelligible sentence when it comes to Dhamma, without resorting to some mystical views or just parroting, oh well, this Ajahn says this. Yeah, but what is your understanding of that? Can you convey it? Can you explain it? And that also then brings to that second point of being able to, can you just speak about what you're understanding, how you're understanding, in front of others? Or is that already an issue? Because if it's an issue, then it should be recognized as an issue. Like, why do I fear if somebody disagrees with me? Again, I'm not rooted in ill will or something. Obviously, you just don't go around preaching for no reason. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that, I don't want to say something because, if other person disapproves with it, my mind will be bothered, or I might start regretting what I said. It's like, well, yeah, that's how irrational mind works. That's how doubt works. So, are you not saying and not pushing things in the direction of understanding, interrogation, and investigation because you're afraid you might look like a fool to yourself later on? And if so, then you realize, no, that's actually not a valid reason to not do it. So you have to accept that responsibility and that risk that, your own mind might start turning against you and annoying you and doubting and so on. But the only reason it can do that is because you're trying to get away with it, get away with lack of clarity, get away with taking the stand when it comes to your own views. And if you are taking the stand when it comes to your own views, then you will feel vulnerable to the extent that your views are not clear. And that's the thing that will make you practice, that will make you clarify.
So it encourages responsibility.
But it also does come down to the actual doing it. I mean, there is a truth in, yes, I don't feel qualified to teach, but that does not disqualify you from being able to convey in a non-teaching manner what you understood, how you understood it, and to what extent, and question it and interrogate it. And that's how you will be able to teach properly, because you will clarify things for yourself, and then teaching others will be a side effect of that. That's not why you're doing this. You're doing it because that's how understanding is gained. So, for example, an exercise we can do now. No, it's like something that yesterday I came across that sutta where the Buddha talks about those views that suffering is created by oneself, or suffering is created by another, or suffering is created by both, or suffering is created by neither. So the Buddha said all four views are wrong. It's the contact, pasa, so pressure means suffering is there, dependently arisen, paticcasamuppada. But then you could rightly sort of ask, so wouldn't it be more correct to think that suffering is created by you? through your own negligence, ignorance, craving, and so on. So how should that be understood then?
It's the wrong order. The idea that suffering is created by you.
By you, yeah? So in what sense? So imagine now I'm a complete outsider. I'm familiar with the suttas, but I read that, it doesn't make sense. So I asked you the question, you say it's the wrong order, so how shall I understand the right order then? Just in your own words, whatever you would say to some random person that asks you that question.
So if we look at what the phenomena of you is, preceded. I mean, I won't say this right. It won't. This isn't how I would.
No, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm saying
that's
to
that's
you.
the whole point.
Yeah.
That's the
So
whole point.
I'm saying this in a very kind of abstract way. I would, with somebody who's new, who's like, then I would probably just like talk in a very different way. But yeah, this phenomena of you, in inverted commas, is preceded by things which I have no control over. Therefore, I'm not. Myself.
Yeah, in the nutshell, that's exactly what it is. So even like the craving, the ignorance and stuff, that's not your creation. You're subjected to it. Yes, you're accepting it, welcoming it, acting out of it. That's why you remain bound to the results of craving, to the results of ignorance. But if you were to look at yourself, you don't create that phenomenon. It does not originate from you. And in the same sense as the sutta says, suffering is dependently arisen. That's exactly what it refers to. So, practically speaking, like as somebody who completely, doesn't have any regard for the noble ones, no recognition of the suttas, no virtue, it's less wrong for them to think you are responsible. It's better. So all of the wrong views are not all equally wrong. They're wrong because yes, fundamentally they don't point to the right thing, but some of them are less wrong, and this would be one of the less wrong views. So yes, it's better to think that it's all created by you, because then you will leave yourself no excuse but to try and deal with it. If you start dealing with it rightly, you'll get to understand then that, so to that extent it's not created by me. And obviously the whole sutta, the answer, on the basis of the answer the Buddha gave, it becomes obvious, he's talking in that ultimate sense. So it's like, no. Presence of suffering is due to the presence of craving, or presence of contact, presence of pressure. And yes, that's not something you do. That's something you're subjected to, but being ignorant in regard to what you're subjected to, you assume the ownership act and so on. And then as a result of that mistake already, you get to think you are the one who created suffering. So even your view on suffering is the result of your ignorance in regard to that pressure that is dependently
the nature of that pressure.
Yeah. So then, so now that's clear to me. So how can then I train myself in regard to that pressure? But do I just take any pressure, or is there any like a set of prerequisites I gotta meet in order for that pressure to be endured rightly, or I just find things that bother me and I do them? How do I go about it? How would I train myself in regard to that pressure so I don't suffer?
The statement I gave before was that this phenomenon of self is preceded by things that are outside of my control. So we could look at examples of those things that could help you develop and establish that understanding. So for example, how are you feeling right now?
Okay, but so does that mean I can just at any point in my life, no matter what I'm getting up to, sit down and ask that question? And go in the right direction?
Well, it will be abstract.
Why would it be abstract? What do I need to do so it's not abstract? Yeah, it would be abstract. That's exactly my point. So how can I then do it without it remaining abstract? What is the... others, if they have ideas, they can say it.
Well, sense restraint, virtue...
Yeah. And that's why it's not optional. That's why, even if people think the Dhamma without sense restraint and virtue, they're not thinking the Dhamma. And that brings to the other point of I think we mentioned that in our recording when you were sitting with us the other day. It was like when people think, as long as I make any effort towards the Dhamma in terms of thinking, pondering, doesn't matter in what order of things I do it, I'm on the path of the Dhamma because I'm aiming towards liberation. But it's like, abstractly, you are, sure. but order of doing things matters. And same what we said this morning, like you can have all the lofty ideas, but if you're not enduring things rightly, on the right level, it's going to remain abstraction that's kind of fueled by the currently suiting and agreeable and supportive circumstances. So it's important because it's easy to overlook. Okay, yeah, no, Dhamma, yeah, I understand that as I go by. No, you got to do that before, and then the pressure and everything else you feel on account of that will be on the right level where you can just then endure it, look at who is the creator, and all those contemplations will have more room, more basis to apply. So that's why it's whenever the Buddha gave the answer to the practice, unless he was somebody who's already in the path but he needed some specific clarification, that answer was always on the level of gradual training. It's not optional. And the order of developing that training is the way you have to do it. Yes, you can parallel to your virtue and sense training. You can keep thinking about the Dhamma. We say, you must stop thinking until you can do it, but don't put the emphasis on that. Don't think that's the practice. The practice is actually upholding the virtue, restraining the senses, and sort of containing your otherwise uncontained mind.
So this is something that I read this morning, and I'll give it to you. Not that I have the answer. So, the Buddha says that one should regard pleasant feeling as pain, and painful feeling as a dart, and neither pleasant nor painful feeling as anicca. Why? Pleasure as pain. Why must I regard pleasant feeling that I enjoy? Why must I regard that as painful? Because it's pleasant. No? What's painful about
Contradiction, mysticism.
it? Yeah. What is painful about that pleasure?
So this is the abstract answer. With an ignorant mind, one will automatically crave more pleasure when one experiences pleasure. So if there's an ice cream, the thought of the ice cream is pleasant, and the reason why it's pleasant is because it is contained within this underlying lack of an ice cream, this pain, this uneasiness that makes that ice cream, that phenomena, pleasurable. So if one were to, with ignorance, one might think, the pleasure is in the ice cream, or there is, so one is in that sense perceiving, feeling, but actually if one were to feel the feeling in that scenario, it would be painful because there would be a sense of wanting more of the pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
So it's only pleasurable because one lacks context in regard to that feeling.
So it's like you have an idea of like the pleasure, but the experience of it. You have the idea of like pleasure is nice to have, but the experience of it is
pain.
But now somebody says, I'm aware of all that, but I'm just having the ice cream nonetheless. I'm just aware of all that.
So what's the problem with that?
Well, this is the question.
I think the problem, if you say I know that, well, the problem is that you are not. That's an abstract theory. Like I know that pleasure is not to be sought after, or pleasure is painful, but you're not acting like that. You are acting as though it is pleasure. So your idea.
So you're saying one thing, doing the other.
And you're doing this.
Yeah.
So this is what you actually believe. You believe that pleasure is.
So it is by
fantastic.
Actions that somebody is known as what they are.
Yeah, exactly.
No matter what they're
Exactly.
saying,
Yeah.
what are they doing? That's their belief. That's the value.
And so like for example, if somebody who is again an outsider, so maybe they just now start to wander even further and say, okay, but why is the pleasure a problem? Why do I need to free myself from such a harmless pleasure like eating ice cream, for example? Doesn't harm anyone. why do I need to regard that as pain so to free my mind from it? Where I don't see a problem with it. Where's the problem? Where's the issue with allowing such pleasures?
The loss of perspective that is.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, this understanding that of the nature of craving leads to this establishment whereby the mind isn't moved by more particular phenomena, or it's able to become established in.
So in other words, it's a weakness you give into, and the more you give into, the weaker you become.
Yeah, by acting out of it, then exactly.
You keep yourself dependable on acting out of it.
Yeah.
So that's the whole point.
So the pleasure of having an ice cream, as you say, it's not exactly an unwholesome thing. People don't regard it as something very unwholesome, but is it necessary to do?
Well, that's the thing.
No.
It's not unwholesome. Ice cream is not unwholesome. Yeah. Your desire behind is what's unwholesome. So if you judge your desire by the object of your desire, then you won't necessarily see a problem, because sometimes there is no problem in the object of the desire. But see, unknowingly then you actually perpetuate the problem, which is the desire. So if you can eat the ice cream desirelessly, as the Buddha said, the only blameless person, it's not what you eat, it's not if you're vegan or vegetarian or whatever else, or eat only the stuff that's fallen from a tree. The only blameless one is the one that eats without a desire, whatever you eat. So, but not seeing that problem, then through eating something like an ice cream, which in itself is not an issue, you are carrying the issue, which sooner or later then, it's going to bite you back. The desire will come. That's why the Buddha says suffering is not getting what you want. And the problem of that is not things that don't come to you. The problem is that you want them in the first place, which means sooner or later something will not come your way because you want it. If you didn't want it, whether it comes and goes makes no difference to you. So that's why even the slightest desire with sensuality and sensual craving is the problem. Because the root of suffering, the root of dependence is that desire, not ice cream or this or that.
Not pleasure, not pain.
In a way, yeah. Well, it's avoiding pain, sure. But so that the pleasure you get on account of the object of desire you engage with is secondary to the basically pain of the desire you're trying to avoid by doing it. That's where the issue is.
But is it possible to eat without desire?
Yes, arahant can eat without desire.
With what intention? To sustain the body?
To whatever, yeah. He feels hunger in his belly, he puts stuff in it.
Yeah, so
But isn't that also in some way desire?
No.
To sustain the body? To live long?
No, that's just an intention. So arahant can have intentions without a desire.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference there. But yes, if you can see the difference, you'll be at least a sotapanna.
Mm-hmm. So actually,
How can you have intention without a desire?
But so Putujana can intend without desire, but he does not.
He won't recognize it exactly.
But
yeah.
but it is possible.
no.
Well, unknowingly, which
Yes,
means
yes, yes.
which means it's not really like you need to know it for it to be recognized.
Yes,
That's
yes,
why-
but you don't see. One doesn't see the difference.
Well, again, we're not talking about the abstract Putujanas, what they might do. We're talking about a personal point of view, which is either a Putujana or on the way to be an Arahant. Or
so
an
our
Arahant.
intention is.
So I can abstractly, theoretically, yes, Putujana can do that, but that doesn't mean that a Putujana should start thinking now, oh, I am doing that.
No.
Yeah. Well, I know you're not implying that, but the way you talk about it implies that.
Okay.
So if somebody else hears that, so Putujana can then eat without a desire. Oh yeah, I do that sometimes. No, you don't.
Yeah.
The only
No,
way to
because,
do it is to know that you're not doing it.
Yes, but so the problem is not seeing what Jnanavira says, that intention does not necessarily imply craving.
Yes,
Exactly.
Yeah. that needs to be seen.
Yes.
That needs to be thoroughly understood.
Mm.
And that's why the Dhamma, and even talking about Dhamma, should only be done on that personal level, because it's already misunderstood, and it's much easier to misunderstand if I make a, again, theoretically correct statement that yes, a Putujana can intend without desire.
Accidentally.
Exactly, but see, from his point of view, he can't, because all he sees is the desire.
Yes.
So an Arahant can see that sometimes you do it without a desire, but that doesn't, his point of view does not apply to you.
So
So that's why you need to
Yeah.
make some special care to not talk in such impersonal senses, because people already are way too keen to assume they're already on the path simply by thinking the Dhamma, they're already towards arahantship simply by being inspired, and so on.
Yeah.
And that's why, from the personal point of view, that's where the problem is, and that's where the solution is. So if you start thinking, okay, everything I do is rooted in desire, how do I free myself from it? So although there are some instances you're not rooted in desire, by saying that everything is rooted in desire will kind of force you to be very, very careful and look until you do discern, and then you can relax, sure. But if you try to relax sooner, it's going to end up masking some problem or the other. Oh well, if you try to relax sooner, it will be rooted in desire.
But have you now answered why these sensual pleasures are painful? Because that was the original question.
Yeah, why is pleasure painful?
Or why should it be seen as painful?
Yeah, why should it be seen as
Because,
painful?
because that's the instruction, it should be regarded as such. So something is pleasurable, but now somebody says you should see it as painful. But the more one understands why that instruction is valid, the better one will be able to regard it as such. Well, you could take it on faith, but it would be a bit of a clash, like, okay, I experience pleasure, but I should not, and then I feel guilty or something. But well, now we're going to talk about Patujana again, but he does not see an escape from suffering. So the only way he can deal with that which is painful
Is distraction to
is
sensuality.
put the sensual pleasures over against it.
Yeah.
But now somebody who does see these Four Noble Truths, right, the origin and where suffering ceases doesn't depend on sensual pleasures in order to allow the suffering to cease. Because he's got this third noble truth, which is cessation of suffering.
So
And so
that's exactly the answer there. Why do you need to do that?
yes, and so then seeing where suffering ceases, this whole domain of sensuality stands out as quite superfluous. It's not necessary anymore to put that over against pain. There might still be this pull due to how prone somebody was to sensual pleasures, but they are not necessary anymore to deal with this whole burden of existence as such.
So is that why then you should regard prospect of pleasure as painful?
Well, this would be my answer, yes.
Because it does say.
So does that mean that this would refer only to somebody with the right view?
Which Sutta? The one that
At least Sodavana.
That Sutta makes precisely the distinction. It says an ordinary person
Exactly.
has no other way of dealing with arisen suffering other than putting sensual pleasures over against it. But now here somebody who sees the Dhamma has another way. And so this is why it should be seen as painful, because these sensual, my understanding is that these sensual pleasures sit on top of the pain for ordinary person. And so he first should learn to not go in that direction, which will make the pain more salient. But that's precisely how you can, that's my approach, how one can then discern the origin of that pain. If that's not going to be the prominent thing which sticks out, it's going to be difficult to see how it originates.
So can then an outsider then just start applying attitude of every pleasure will be regarded as painful?
Yes. If he sees every sensual pleasure as painful, whenever there is the desire for sensual pleasure, if he remembers that is going against the Dhamma and will prevent him from seeing the actual origin of suffering.
He does. I mean, an outsider, so the one who doesn't see the origin of suffering.
Yeah.
Would he benefit from simply what he said first? Attitude should be developed whereby pleasure is seen as pain.
Well, I would say as arisen in dependence upon the pain. So there is something that sits sort of below it, and that is where you want to go. So don't go in the direction of the sensual pleasure, but go into the direction of the pain that is below it. And if you see that sensual pleasure is your attitude of dealing with that pain, seeing that it depends on it, then that which depends on pain is part of the pain. And so he comes to regard it as painful.
Right. But
and
that would be the result if you understand things.
Yeah, well,
but I'm saying if somebody who doesn't understand,
well,
could they understand if they just regard pleasure as painful? Would they arrive at the understanding you just described?
Well, if somebody has faith, they might. But if they're inclined towards understanding, they might want to work on understanding.
Sorry?
Well, if somebody has faith in the Buddha's instruction, they might just take that as a valid teaching and start regarding things like that, and that might have results. But it's also possible that somebody wants to work on the understanding
Yeah.
first, but arrive at
Sure,
the same.
sure. No,
So-
I just
Yeah. So
Yeah,
so
there
they
are many
might
different-
actually.
So, what would happen to somebody who is not familiar with the Buddhist teaching, but for some reason adopts that attitude?
Yeah, that
That
might.
every pleasure is painful,
Yeah.
and because of that attitude, he doesn't engage with that pleasure. How far can he take that?
Well, he might be able to properly restrain himself in sensual pleasures.
What does it mean? Properly restrain? Like free himself from sensuality?
It's just
Um,
aversion. Isn't it?
Well, yeah. If some ordinary person goes to
Yeah.
the Buddha, hears just this teaching and has faith, he might be able to abandon.
Even
actually-
without a Buddha, if an ordinary outsider
Yeah.
would adopt this attitude that every pleasure is actually painful and sustain that attitude for the duration of the pleasure, pull of the pleasure that he endures, he would be able to free himself from the assumption of sensuality.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the Buddha did say, like, outside of this dispensation, there are samanas and brahmins that have uprooted
Yes.
sensual desires
Mhm.
completely, rightly,
Yes.
not wrongly.
Because if you are your attitude, you're developing this attitude of pleasure, sensual pleasure, but pleasure itself is painful.
Well, sensual pleasure, because there's also unworldly pleasure, which is
Yeah,
which,
but-
is,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is the wholesome pleasure.
But yeah,
Which can only be discerned after you have thoroughly withdrawn yourself from the sensual pleasure.
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's not something that you can. So you said unworldly pleasure, the pleasure of renunciation.
Yeah, I was referring to jhanas just by saying
Yeah.
unworldly pleasure, but yeah, that of course.
Pleasure of renunciation that arises
Later. Yes.
later,
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
cannot
not
start
something
with
that you can crave for,
No.
Exactly.
No.
crave against.
No, that's right. Yeah.
But so you are regarding pleasure as painful, but you don't know why. Why is it painful?
Yeah, well, you might know,
So
you might have an
yeah,
inkling, you
yeah.
might not know, you
Out
might
of
just
faith,
make.
you just
yeah.
you
Some people might do it out of faith.
You're
yeah.
dispassionate with it. You
If you regard it like that long enough, yeah. Why? Why would that happen though? Why, if you regard it long enough as painful, why would then you, at one point, see through it and become free from it?
Because it is pain.
Exactly. That's exactly why. Because it is factually painful.
and by
So although you don't know the reason, or you're not entirely clear on your reasons why you're regarding it as painful, you stick to that attitude out of faith, out of intellectual pondering, out of something, and because it factually is so, you get to see it. Because you are actually emulating what it actually is. And then, the danger did become apparent and the lack of satisfaction, and then there is no more desire towards it. In the same sense, there is no more desire towards the food that you just vomited. When you recognize it for what it is.
And so the second, it says, and then regard painful feeling as a dart. Because if you are experiencing pleasure and you're regarding that as pain, and you're stepping away from that, then when you get pain,
That's even more
That's-
unwanted.
there's no
And
way
that's
you're going
more
to
like, well, actually, no, I don't want to answer it. Maybe somebody else can answer it. Why? Okay, let's move to the next one. So then, what would be the benefit of regarding pain as a deadly dart?
Well, it reinforces that disenchantment, that detachment from feeling.
Yeah,
Because
What
pleasure
else?
is also pain.
sure.
Yeah.
But this kind of
Pain
refers
is
to,
a dart.
you have pleasure,
Extreme.
pull of pleasure, then you have the pull of pain, as in the pressure of pain. So why would that be then? What would be the benefit of regarding the pressure of pain, or regard that as a deadly arrow? In the same sense, we discovered the practical benefit of regarding pleasure as painful, i.e., it emulates what it actually is. So sooner or later, if you stick to it, you will be uprooting the desire towards it because you're seeing it as not pleasant anymore. So what is it that you would see if you are regarding pain as a deadly arrow?
That pain can come to you regardless whether you want it or not. It
Right,
just,
so that you're entirely enclosed and liable to it.
it just strikes you.
And how's that felt then?
Well, obviously, yes.
Like you're saying, that's a dart.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
And
you're being struck
So,
down.
so if you are at any given second at risk of being struck by a deadly arrow,
Yes.
could you become careless? Could you
Well-
get easily distracted?
Mm.
Could you forget about the practice and like postpone it? No, it would just keep you on your toes effortlessly. All you need to do is protect that context, and you're effortlessly mindful and careful and watchful. So yeah, if you develop that attitude, then you don't have to focus on pulling all these other neglected aspects and so on of practice, because everything will be amplified. But now obviously that does not mean that when there is neither pleasure nor pain, you keep trying to get the sense of pain and urgency. Because the third one is when there is neither pleasure nor pain, you contemplate that changeability, impermanence,
Yeah.
anicca.
So at any moment it can become either
Yeah.
pleasure, which is
So it's
painful.
not felt there, it's just neutral feeling. So when things are neither pleasant nor unpleasant, that's what you look at, that anicca aspect of it.
Mm.
And what's the benefit of that? Practical benefit of looking at anicca when it's neither pleasant nor unpleasant.
Yeah, further sense of urgency.
To not relax.
Can relax for a sense of urgency, yeah? But why can't you just look at anicca when pleasure is pleasant or when pain is pleasant? Why shouldn't you look at anicca then? Sorry?
Because it's usually rooted in trying to get rid of it.
Exactly, yeah. Because you'll be doing it for the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're not pulled by pleasure or pressured by pain, then you can now do the anicca because you won't be rooted in trying to get rid of anything.
Yeah, I think it also says somewhere that when neither pleasure nor pain is not seen.
Not seen, it's felt as felt unpleasantly. When it's seen, it's felt pleasantly.
Yeah.
But that's now the level of that higher pleasure.
Yes.
Because if you were to practice that, seeing pleasure as painful and pain as a dart, mindful, not trying to get rid of the pain, not trying to get more pleasure, and you kind of developing that, I would say the outcome is neutral experience, neutral feeling experience, feeling of peace.
When it's known, when it becomes known.
Yeah, but that becomes known to you.
Yeah.
But you must now regard that experience, that feeling, as anicca.
Yeah, don't be
As, again, not something that you must delight in.
Or
Hold
distract
it.
yourself from, or keep it on the level of being
distract.
unclear. Yeah.
Or
That's why neutral feeling when not known is felt unpleasantly.
So you know it's
So
as
what also is
uncertain.
going to happen is that if you actually are sense restraint, virtuous, not going towards sensuality, not trying to get rid of the pain out of the habit, then you realize what's going to happen is that then something seemingly painful that you're experiencing within that setup, you realize, oh, this is painful only because I'm not looking at it.
Or this is suffering because I'm...
Yeah, it's suffering because I'm ignoring it. So you realize that within that setup, you're actually going to have many neutral feelings that will be bothering you simply because you're looking elsewhere. And that neutral feeling needs to be known. And once you start to recognize, then you realize, oh yeah, so I still assume this is the pain of the desires, that it wasn't actually. The pain of the desires stopped when I stopped engaging with desires. Now this is the pain of the lack of clarity in regard to this, and similar. And that's also when it becomes clearer, that whole thing of replacing the pain of sensuality with the pain of renunciation, because it's a better pain. Like the pain of a household life, replace it with the pain of the renunciate life. And then replace the pleasures of the household life with the pleasures of renunciation.
So if your general experience is one of neutral feeling, which is felt like uncertain.
If that's what you look at it, yeah, if that's what you look for.
But that, yeah.
Like I mean, yes, it's felt uncertain for somebody that knows already where to look for anicca, yeah. But it will
But that
not,
uncertainty
in
is
itself,
quite-
it will not be felt uncertain to somebody who doesn't look for anicca. That's why it's encouraged to develop the attitude of anicca towards that. Because yes, it's the purest example of uncertainty that's neither pulling you nor pressuring you. So it's the best basis to develop the direct insight. But only if it's not done in response to sensuality trying to get rid of it or pain trying to act out of it.
Yeah, or somebody can get complacent when there's a lot of this neither pleasant nor painful feeling. You might almost take refuge in that, considering this is neither painful nor pleasant,
Yeah.
i.e. it's quite agreeable, failing to see that at any moment it
Well,
can
that's
change, and
like
then you're stuck with the other
If
two
you're
again.
dishonest,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, this
agreeable.
is- yes.
It's not. Because
Yes.
if you're complacent, if you simply look at it for what it is, unless you're seeing anicca, it's going to be felt unpleasant. So not known, a neutral feeling is
Uh-huh.
actually felt painfully.
I see, yes. Right.
So it's how you look at it determines how you're going to feel it. Let's say like that.
Yeah. Painful because that which is impermanent is suffering.
No, painful because you're ignoring that which is impermanent is suffering. If you don't ignore it, anicca is very pleasant, recognizing it. It's very liberating and uplifting and, relieving you of all the burden from the entire samsara. But when it's not seen for that, then yes, then it's painful.
So when anicca is seen, not seen, it's painful.
Yeah.
But when it is known, should we say?
If it's known, that's how you free yourself from that pain. Yeah. That's why through contemplating anicca and dukkha, you actually mind becomes liberated.
Anatta,
Yeah.
liberation.
So can you then contemplate anatta? How do you contemplate anatta? Or can you contemplate anatta? What do you think?
Well, it's an extension of anicca and dukkha. So the
So okay, let's say that I want to contemplate anatta. I'm an outsider. I just come here. I heard about anatta. It makes sense to me. I want to do the practice of anatta. What do I do?
Well,
How do I go about it in the right way?
phenomena of self again is preceded by these things which have arisen by themselves, which are anicca.
Yeah. But I'm not asking what anatta is. I'm just asking what do I do in order to see it?
Well, in regards to what we've just been talking about, to contemplate anicca and see thereby the suffering of pleasant feelings and unpleasant feelings, and
So can I just start with that, or are there any prerequisites that I have to develop beforehand?
sense restraint and virtue.
Yeah. So you got to say that.
Yeah.
You gotta. I'm an
Yeah,
outsider who
yeah.
comes and asks you about anatta, and I know they. Oh, I'll just give you the answer, but that
Yeah.
won't be the Dhamma for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, you can contemplate anatta by developing, taking on virtue, sense restraint,
Yeah.
guarding of the sense doors.
Yeah.
The pain within that arises, then either don't resist it, don't try to get rid of it, don't give in to the pain of sensuality towards the desires, then you will be left with what's felt within that setup.
Yeah.
And there you are, you're actually already doing the anatta.
Yeah.
Whether you even think about terms of anatta or not, that is what anatta, practice of
Yeah.
anatta is.
Yeah.
Even the Buddha the same, he would always give the entire spiel of the gradual training. Because that is the answer. And I remember first time I would read the suttas and somebody comes and asks the suffering and stuff, and then he would say, yes, I'll teach you the way to that exactly specific acute question you posed about how to free myself from suffering. And then he starts giving the answer to that by saying, here a young man shaves off his hair, leaves the household life, restrain yourself with the rules of Patimokkha. And I always thought in the beginning, okay, yeah, fine, but come on, just now give me the answer. All of this is obvious. But no, that is the answer every single time. That needs to be done to arrive at the answer. If you think you can access the answer without having met this training of the right order, it won't be the answer you're getting. And people don't realize how important that is. So how do I go about contemplating anatta? Well, by keeping the precepts, dwelling the sense restraint, watchful guarding of the sense doors. Then the suffering you start experiencing within that type of container, that has potential to be seen as anicca, felt as dukkha rightly, and then the whole experience as anatta.
Yeah.
If you don't do that setup, whatever you feel won't be what you think you're feeling. And that's like, as you would have said in maybe Mulapraya or somewhere. No, another sutta. Whatever he conceives, tujana, it's always different than that. Even if he's conceiving the Dhamma or whatever else, it's always going to be different than that.
Yes, and there's also this simile of this separate piece of wood, these three similes, which spontaneously occurred. And
Got to dry it up.
yeah, and it does say there that even if he is experiencing painful waking feelings due to striving,
Yeah,
he's not going to get the result.
yeah, because he's
Why?
not withdrawn.
Exactly. So then, if somebody does some retreat somewhere and has aching knees and aching back and aching head and shoulder and stuff like this on account of sitting for 10 hours a day, but they're not observing any precepts, then one might assume that there's a sense of discipline involved in that. But as you would say, this is on the wrong level.
So there you go. But now actually, to play devil's advocate, but they are observing the precepts during their retreat.
Yes.
But where's the problem? So what you said is correct. Exactly. All the pain they're going through, it's not going to result in the knowledge.
No.
Although, at the same time, when they're going through that pain, they are keeping the precepts.
Well, yes.
But why wouldn't it result then in the knowledge?
Because, okay, so you are saying if they do observe the precepts during that retreat, if somebody has been observing the precepts beforehand and has been restrained beforehand, then it's not impossible that in fact they get results on that retreat. But what I was trying to say is that ordinarily people do not do that in their, let's say, household life, and then when they come to retreat, most of the time
Then
there's not much emphasis on the virtue either. So there is so the idea is then that okay, we cannot be bothered because this is all like Hinayana, this is all discipline, narrow, small-minded, and so on. So the discipline then is not on the level of sila, but the discipline is on conforming to a schedule which tells you when to sit and to walk and all the rest of it.
So basically, the precepts are conditional due to the circumstances. Circumstances are making them keep the precepts.
Yeah.
That's exactly why.
Well, if they keep
The
the
pain-
precepts, yeah. But
No. Even if they keep the perfect precepts,
Yes,
if it's
okay.
rooted in circumstances, not their decision to put the precepts and responsibility for the intention behind the action first, that's why sharp, racking, painful feeling will not result in the knowledge. Even if they kept the precepts before, even if they keep the precepts after their retreat, even if they keep during the retreat. Their view puts the precept second. Their view assume the precept as a conditional duty, so I get this direct access to what I'm trying to get. And that's why always those retreats that are always based on that are wrong because of that. Because people arrive at it thinking they are directly going for something, while what they should put first is actually conditionally second.
Yeah.
And same goes for the monks, by the way. Somebody can be in robes for 50 years, pure virtue, and still be a putujana. And that's exactly what Silabhata Paramasa is. Doing it conditionally on the level of the sense of duty, and that extent, and not putting it first as your practice. Because if you do, then you get the weight of your intention. Because now, it doesn't matter if the rule doesn't specify I can or cannot do this. I know that it's rooted in the intention affected with desire. Thus, I won't do it. But see, if I assume the precepts, 570 of them, doesn't matter.
No.
But I assume them as the external definitions, then anything not defined I can do, and I don't have to think about.
Yeah.
And there is no practice for you at all. And that's unfortunately what's considered purity today in like monasteries and temples. It's the idea of being overly defined about every little aspect and sticking to it, which automatically results in putting your intention second. Because the letter is important, the authority is important, the tradition is important, the external definition is important. So even if you spend your lifetime doing it, and enduring lots of pain on account of it, there will be no wisdom arising on account of sharp and painful feeling that you're going through. Because you're still keeping the perversion in your core. What comes first?
Yeah, if sharp breaking feelings arise at all. Somebody could also just fall asleep within that context.
Sure.
Which then is in a sense pleasurable, but it's the wrong kind of pleasure.
Yeah. But then if you realize that that's what comes first, putting the virtue, so to reveal your intentions for which you are already assuming responsibility, then the idea of going on a retreat or not, well, it's circumstantial. Like, I might go on a 10-day retreat just to change the environment. Either way, internally, my practice remains the same.
Exactly, yes.
Not giving into greed, not giving
Exactly.
into hatred, not
There's
giving
no
into
difference.
satisfaction.
There is no difference whether I'm here or there, my work is the same. Virtue comes first, intentions revealed on account of my sense restraint is my work. So, yes, if I can have a time to spend in some quiet environment, I'll do that. Because it's obviously going to be like less harassing me than if I stay in the middle of the city. But either way, I can't do the practice only when I'm there. That's not the practice. That's just reacting basically as out of aversion towards the busy city. So I'm just trying to get rid of discomfort by doing a retreat or whatever else.
Yeah.
And now we're just, we're talking just on the level of the pure environment of a retreat. We're not getting even into what views are being taught on the retreats and stuff.
Yeah,
that's issue in itself.
Yeah, that's going to be another talk.
Yeah.
Now, when you say that it's important to put the intentions first, always in the context of the sila, and to feel the weight and the burden of that, can we connect that with the right practice of mindfulness of breathing, which is also an exercise of putting intention first? Or is that a bit of a leap?
How would you go about it? How would you connect it?
Well,
tell me more.
If I sit down and I'm breathing in and I'm breathing out, and I know that I'm breathing in and breathing out, then that seems to me to be that's a bodily act, a bodily intention. Breathing in, breathing out is something that I'm doing.
Oh, right. So you're referring that just general sense of what would be the right application of anapanasati.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And I was trying to connect that with the idea, because this seems to be one of the more popular discourses, because there's this tendency to teach methods and techniques and so on.
Yeah.
We don't need to go into that. But once we have established...
Then it's not a method, it's not a technique.
Yes, and we see that the right virtue, as we have just said, is about putting the intentions first. Then I was trying to find out if somebody has understood all of that, and they sit in that retreat context, and then somebody rightly expounds anapanasati, would that not be seeing on a deeper level that there are intentions going on, and that the whole practice is to see how...
But it probably wouldn't happen in a retreat setting. It would happen in solitude. You don't go sit in a room full of people to watch your breath. That's already a factor.
Yeah, of course.
So if somebody would have seen and developed virtue rightly and already has the right view, all he would need to do is have an empty room.
Yes.
That's the extent. Close the door. That's the extent of solitude needed. And then yes, exactly. Then the practice would be knowingly he breathes in, knowingly I breathe out, knowingly I breathe in.
Yes.
So it's very much on the level of the intentions. And then knowingly I'll intend to breathe like this, knowingly I'll breathe out like that. Knowingly I'll basically, while I'm breathing in, I shall intend to relinquish things, ideas, activities that my mind holds. And that's the practice, it's the practice of discerning the neutral intention. But to practice discerning the neutral intention, while you don't even see wholesome and unwholesome intention, while your virtue is defined by circumstances and externally assumed rules, it does not apply to you.
Yes. So
that's why anapanasati was taught to those who were at least sotapannas and still had work to do. And there was another one, I mentioned that in that talk we did in Sri Lanka. You read that sutta, was that Arita, Venerable Arita? When the Buddha says anapanasati will bring much benefit to those who do it, do monks do it, and Venerable Arita says, yes, Lord, I do anapanasati. And he says, how do you do it? He said, knowingly I breathe in, knowingly I breathe out, and because of it I have...
Before he says that, I've abandoned sensual desires for past sensual pleasures. I've abandoned
future
sensual desires for future sensual pleasures.
Yep.
I
Well, and free from them here and now.
Yeah, he abandons those desires for pleasures of the past and future, and he, calms down in regards to any resistance that is felt now.
Oh yeah, the patiga. Yeah.
Internal resistance.
In regards to
now
the body.
He's abandoned those essential pleasures. What do you feel?
What you're left with is the
pain of
existence. Yeah.
And then he relaxes in regard to that. Mindfully I breathe in,
mindfully breathe out. Yeah.
And then the Buddha says,
and that's
that
it.
is indeed it.
Exactly.
But he then goes a bit further.
Because there is obviously the subtler aspects of conceit and appropriation left there.
Mm.
But you realize, so first of all, anapanasati wouldn't have been applying to him if he wasn't at least a sotapanna.
Mm.
Second of all, he was already, he freed himself from sensuality by seeing the danger and so on. And obviously knowingly breathing in, knowingly breathing out.
Mm-hmm.
He calmed down the patiga or the resistance to your own existence, which then uprooted that tendency towards sensuality.
Mm.
So in itself, that's all you need to do. Knowingly breathe in, knowingly breathe out. That's your anapanasati.
Mm.
And when then you become free from sensuality, established in the right view, then the rest of the anapanasati can apply to you.
Starts to apply,
Yeah.
yes. So if somebody comes along here or somewhere else and says, Bhante, can you instruct me in anapanasati?
You
Then-
say yes.
And then you start with...
Teach them, tell them that they have to spend years of developing virtue, and that will be their anapanasati.
Yeah, so...
And if they're puzzled by it, you say, well, the anapanasati, famously expounded in the Anapanasati Sutta,
Yes.
was taught by the Buddha to those who were at least sotapanna or higher.
Yes.
So until you reach that, this does not apply to you.
But can they sit down, knowingly breathe in, knowingly breathe out?
No.
They cannot, you would say.
No.
Uh-huh.
No, definitely they cannot.
Not with the right context.
No, there won't be the Anapanasati. That would be meditation with sensuality.
Yeah, of course.
That would be premeditating, under-meditating, over-meditating, mismeditating. That would be waiting for that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
No, because you don't see intentions. How can you do Anapanasati rightly when you haven't been sufficiently cultivating the recognition of intentions behind your actions,
Mm-hmm.
where wholesome and unwholesome is rooted?
Mm-hmm.
No? So
But-
any Anapanasati, by the farthest stretch of imagination, doesn't matter, but still it will be rooted in sensuality, trying to get the pleasure, trying to avoid the pain, trying to avoid responsibility, trying to avoid dealing with things that need to be dealt with beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
It will be, give me this so I don't have to actually do the work.
Mm.
Give me the practice so I don't have to practice.
So why do you want to practice anapanasati? What's the reason? Because do you want something from it? Do you want some future pleasure? Do you desire some future pleasure?
I want freedom.
I want to, okay, let's play
And what
devil's
is it?
advocate again. So, well, no, I want to practice Anapanasati because it calms me down. And calmness is good. So what's the problem then? What's the problem with me doing Anapanasati if it calms me down? Anyone can say.
Didn't say before the teaching of the anapanasati that you abandoned future.
Well, yeah, I'll do that later. But factually, when I sit, I'm not Sotapanna, I don't know the Buddha's teaching that much, but I went on a retreat and I was taught Anapanasati, and when I sit and do it, it calms me down, factually. What is wrong with that?
Nothing.
Why is that a problem?
Well,
So then means I
Unless
can do
you-
Anapanasati.
yeah,
No, unless you, as long as you don't regard that to be what the Buddha is talking about.
So then it's not
no problem.
Anapanasati, but it is the Buddha's Anapanasati that I've been taught and I'm doing.
Yeah, so the danger.
So it's either
is-
not the Anapanasati.
Yeah, so somebody might wrongly assume that they are practicing rightly and are making progress. That's the
Yeah.
danger.
Yeah. What else is the more acute danger? Let's say like that.
sensuality.
Let's put Anapanasati aside.
Uh-huh.
What is the danger of me valuing my calmness?
Because it's sensuality. It's like
Yeah.
it's not seeing the pleasure as painful.
Yeah.
It's
What
denying that.
Sorry?
It's denying, in a sense, disturbance, or trying to deal with it.
Dealing with it, exactly. It's management.
It's a conditional calmness.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you are calm when you get. So it's like, okay, so you value calmness, which means you're not uprooting the disturbance.
Mm.
Like, yes, it's nice to be calm, but the real question you should ask, but why am I disturbed in the first place? That's the problem. But if I just do anapanasati for the calmness that I took at face value as something that is always good, means I'm taking simultaneously for the face value that I will keep getting disturbed. So am I liable to future disturbance once I calm myself? Yeah. Oh, well, that's the problem. Not that you were disturbed or calm. The problem is that you can get disturbed. And it always ties in with the view that, see, by valuing this calmness per se, means I don't means all the views that I have on account of what is the disturbing aspect for me will remain unchanged. Because as long as I have access to the technique of calmness, that's how I deal with it. I was like, but did the disturbance come from you not watching your nostrils sufficiently enough? Is that how disturbance entered you? So when you calm down, how does that disturbance come back? Why do you lose that calmness? And then we're back onto intentions behind the actions. You cannot become disturbed accidentally. It cannot just happen to you. You always open the door for disturbance. How? Acting out of greed, aversion, delusion. That's it. No other gateway for disturbance to enter you. So all your efforts that are focused and revolve around calming yourself are the efforts of just plastering over a wound that remains unchanged. And it always ties in with the views that disturbance comes from the world. Well, it's the busy life, it's the busy this. None of that. The robbers chopping off your limbs should not be disturbing you if you did the Dhamma rightly.
Yeah.
So through your practice of calmness taken at face value, you are maintaining your wrong views of where the disturbance actually is. So the only way to force yourself to deal with the disturbance rightly then is to not give in to the temptation to manage it through calmness.
Yeah.
So it's never good to do it unless you have the right view. You'll be closer to calming yourself rightly by pondering on the qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, the sense restraint, the virtue, taking responsibility for your action and being watchful and careful before you do things by body, speech and mind. That will result in the factual samadhi, i.e. being less likely, less liable to be disturbed even amidst the disturbances. And funny enough, that's what the Buddha says in the suttas.
Yes.
If you're not a sotapanna, what your samadhi is, it's like recollecting the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, the virtue. Will unify your mind and basically make it unmovable in the face of things that want to move it.
Yeah, and generosity and the deities.
Exactly.
Sometimes it says also.
Yeah. So develop those contexts actively, obviously with the virtue to match it, and that will be the factual samadhi, that will be the factual peace and calmness that's not rooted in just trying to manage the pain. And also it will not be fueling your wrong view further of where the pain and disturbance comes from in the first place.
And this is why people keep coming back from one retreat to the next. Yeah. Because on account of this wrong approach, they become dependent on that calmness.
Exactly.
And so it's a good marketing tool for just signing up for the next one.
It's just that the people that market it are victims themselves of the same view.
Yeah, they're not doing it deliberately.
They're not doing it deliberately, yeah.